everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is presented to you by LawSikho. So, today we have a lot on our plate. We will be discussing four articles, and surprisingly, all the four articles today are very, very nice. So, the first article is from the Hindu, the anatomy of a spring ceasefire. As we know that India and Pakistan have now come to a conclusion and they have come to an agreement to ceasefire. So, what is it and what has been the complete chronology of the ceasefire agreements between the two countries? We'll be discussing in this article. The second one, which is recalibrating relations with European Union. So this talks about the trade relations specifically which India and the European Union have, and what are the prospects in the future wherein India needs to work. Thirdly, knowledge and diplomacy, which is from the Indian Express. So this talks about the relations that India has with the global partners in context with the knowledge and other services, like in, for example, in science and tech, etc. And then we have Unseemly Proposal, which is from the Indian Express again, which talks about the recent case wherein the bench, which was led by the Chief Justice of India, has asked a rape accused that if he would be willing to marry the victim of that particular rape. So obviously it is very much, that puts us to a surprise. So we'll be discussing it in this article as well. And finally, we have the news and flash column. So if you're interested in the CLAT exam, then you can join our project Maverick, which is it is the cheapest course that we have. It is only for 100 rupees. So the course link will be there in the description box below. If you're looking forward to crack this exam, do join this course as well. Also, you can join our daily quiz, which is live at every morning 9 a.m. at the CLAT Prep channel. The link to that channel is also available in the description box below. So if you're also willing to go for other courses, you can have a look at them too. So this is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. National Food Security Act was enacted in which of the following years? Your options are 2013, 2014, 2015, or 2016. This is the descriptive question from the day's discussion. Discuss the current state of India-Pakistan relations and comment on the way forward for relations between the two countries. So the first article, which specifically talks about the ceasefires between India and Pakistan. So first of all, before we begin with this discussion, let's understand the meaning of ceasefires. So if you break this term into two big terms, smaller terms, so we will have cease and we will have fires. So by cease, simply we mean to stop from doing something or to not do something. And by fires, we simply mean any kinds of firing, like this could be a gun firing or any other kind of firing that takes place at the borders or even in the case of military sense. So by ceasefires, we mean a kind of agreement wherein the two parties decide that they would not be firing on each other or each other's army personnel or whatsoever on each other's forces. So recently, the India and Pakistan army, so they have come to a ceasefire agreement. So basically, how have we been able to achieve this lately? Here is the scenario. So after registering 5,130 ceasefire violations in 2020, now can you just understand that just in 1 year, there were more than 5,000 ceasefire violations, which means that there were firings from the one or the other side of the border. So from both the sides in totality, there were more than 5,000 ceasefires. So now from both the sides, through Director Generals of the Military Operations, this ceasefire agreement has been brought up that now we will not be firing on each other's personnel or army. So let's understand the significance of this ceasefire agreement. So 2021 ceasefire has two distinct features. So how is it different from the previous ceasefire agreements? Firstly, it is a joint statement by the two Director Generals of Military Operations. So basically, it gives more authority and more sanction to the ceasefire agreement because it has come from the joint statement of the DGMOs of both the countries. And secondly, unlike the previous declarations, this mentions a specific date to begin. So it will be starting, like as we know, from 24th to 25th February. It had actually given this particular date from when this ceasefire agreement would actually come into force. So this is most significant military measures by India and Pakistan in over 18 years to reduce violence along the LOC in Kashmir. Now, as we know that this orangish red line that you can see here is the line of control. The blue one here is the line of actual control, which basically is debated between India and China. But this one, the orangish one, is the line of control. Now, from here, till this area. So this part is the Pak occupied Kashmir, which India claims as it's to be its own, but definitely the Pakistan authority has gained the power over this region. So now this line, as you can see over here, is the line of control. So here it is saying that the ceasefire agreements have been the most significant military measures or military steps that have been taken by both India as well as Pakistan in over 18 years to reduce the violence along the LOC in Kashmir. So this line has been very sensitive, this border area has been very sensitive, and thus to maintain peace and tranquility over here, it is necessary that ceasefire agreements are adhered to properly. Then it is also significant as it diffuses one side of the two front situation. Now, what actually do we mean by the two front situation? So lately, since the last year specifically, India is said to have been struggling in the true two front situation. Now, as you can see that this is the Indian map. On the left side, that is on the western side of our map, we have Pakistan and issues going on with Pakistan at the line of control. And if we see the eastern side, so this pink region is China, and thus we also had the disturbances going on with China, which were along the line of actual control. Now, these two things, one and the other one, this is called to be as the two front situation for India, wherein India had been struggling very sharply with both the countries at its neighboring side towards the west as well as towards the east. And now, fortunately, the year 2021 has really brought good light in the situation, because now uh, it is not only the LOC ceasefire agreements that we have been agreeing to, but also China and the Indian Army, Chinese and the Indian Army have also agreed to formulate peace at the LAC area and also at the Pangongso Lake. So definitely India, it's a good step, and it's a fortunate step for India as well. And thus, if at all we are able to put forward this ceasefire agreement to a good, in a way, towards a good result, then India definitely will have at least one of the sides diffused in this two front situation. So the timeline of ceasefire agreements, now this, please note it down or just take the PDF of this today, because it is very, very important. It can be a very significant question in your prelims exam, because these all agreements have had their significance in their own sense. So in 1949, there was the first one, which was the Karachi Agreement. So it ended the first war between the two countries, and it was signed under good offices of the United Nations, and thus it created the ceasefire line, or which we knew earlier as the CFL. So please know that the CFL is not valid in today's scenario, because we are moving towards the new things. So we'll learn as to what do we consider in the current situation. But it was the Karachi Agreement that gave us the ceasefire line. Then in 1965, it was the Tashkent Agreement, which ended the war of 1965. Now, as we know that there was also a severe war between India and Pakistan in 1965. So it was the Tashkent Agreement. Tashkent is the capital of Uzbekistan. So it was the Tashkent Agreement that actually ended the 1965 war, and status quo ante bellum was restored. Now, what do we mean by status quo ante bellum? See, by the term status quo, we mean restoring whatever was existent, and by antebellum we mean restoring the situation which were existent before the war. By antebellum we mean before the war. So here status quo antebellum was restored. So whatever were the relations, or be it diplomatic, be it military, or any kind of relations between India and Pakistan, they were resumed back to the situation as they were before this particular 1965 war. And thus the CFL, it remained unaltered. Now, even till the Tashkent Agreement, the ceasefire line remained unaltered. There was no change brought in this line. Then in 1971, there was Shimla Agreement, which ended the 1971 war. Now, as we know that this war was also there between India and Pakistan, so it ended the 1971 war. And again, here we need to note that the status quo ante bellum was not restored. So please keep in mind that in the Tashkent Agreement it was restored, but in Shimla Agreement 1971 it was not restored. And United Nations was not a party, unlike the Karachi Agreement. Finally, in 1972, there was Sachitgarh Agreement, which delineated the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir. very, very important, that which agreement finally delineated the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir. So it was the Sachetgarh Agreement in 1972, which was renamed and which actually renamed the ceasefire line as the line of control. So these, if you want to keep in mind, we can create a good mnemonic or a kind of story that there was a person, or maybe India and Pakistan. First, they went to Karachi. After Karachi, they moved to Tashkent. Then they came back to Shimla, and then finally they moved to Sachetgarh. So just like a story, you can learn these, and thus the events came. And in Sachetgarh Agreement, finally the line of control was delineated in J&K. So these are the essential requirements for a ceasefire. Firstly, it should be clearly articulated, which means that it should clearly specify the various, things and purpose of that particular ceasefire, and mutually agreed set of rules and norms for effective observance along with an intent to observe them. So basically, these are the things that actually constitute the essentials of a ceasefire. So here also you can see it in a big greater detail. So the red one here is the line of control. Here, this part is where the we have the Indian administered Kashmir. This is the Pakistani administered Kashmir, or the Pak occupied Kashmir, which we call as POK. And then this area is the area which is occupied, the area of Aksai Chin and the entire area which has been occupied by China and claimed by India. And this is the line of actual control. So here, one thing that we need to keep in mind is that this entire agreement, so why is it actually important for India? That this actually will not only help India to reduce the presence of China in Pakistan, but also if at all we have good relations with Pakistan, it will become really easier for India to move towards the Central Asia. Now here you can see this is India, this is Pakistan, and this entire area which has Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. So these countries are known to be the countries of the Central Asia, which are of very much importance when it comes to export, import, various kinds of diplomatic relations, and also business deals. So currently it becomes difficult for India. So currently what channel India follows is that from these areas, now be it our important ports in Gujarat or from the western coast, we move towards the Chahabar port, which is somewhat here in Iran. So what do? Is that we move through sea route till the Chahabar port, and then by means of railways we move from here to Afghanistan, cross Afghanistan, and then move towards Central Asia, which is a significantly long route. And just imagine that if at all the situations between India and Pakistan, they improve with time, so if at all India has to move towards these Central Asian countries, it will only have to cross Pakistan, and then directly we will be moving towards the Central Asian countries. So thus this can definitely help India to have a better neighborhood in the close sense, or also in, if we move a little far away, then we have good deals coming up from the Central Asia as well. And also the increasing influence of China in Pakistan, which is making it more averse towards India, can also be reduced with friendly relations being developed in between the both countries. Now, the next article talks about India and European Union. So the Atmanirbhar Bharat program and Budget 21-22 both aimed at making India self-reliant and promote domestic industries. So as we know that the very primary purpose of Atmanirbhar Bharat, when we talk about being self-reliant, and even if we talk about the highlights of the Budget 21-22, they both aim at making India self-reliant. And for becoming self-reliant, what is important is that we have domestic industries which not only can cater to the demands of the domestic population, but also they can manufacture goods and also bring in services that are of global standards and can be exported as well. So this would require phase-wise reduction of the import tariff with strategic partners such as European Union. Now for this, it is not something like that by becoming Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-reliant, we completely become protectionist. See, a few months ago, when this entire concept was brimming on, we had also discussed that what is the difference between self-reliant and being protectionist. See, India is definitely developing and is wanting to become self-reliant so that in the times of crisis or urgencies or emergencies, it does not have to depend on any particular country or outside resource for any essential goods or services. Specifically, obviously, we need to concentrate on the essential goods and services more importantly, like, for example, our energy resources like petroleum, crude oil, gas, etc. Then it can be for maybe pharmacy, medicines, medical equipments, electronics, etc. So that is one phase of making itself self-reliant. But if at all we say that we are being protectionist, so how would we know if at all we say that we do not want any kinds of trade relations with any outside country? Do you think that it is possible or feasible? Definitely not. So definitely India is not wanting to become protectionist and does not want to shut down all the exports and imports relations that it has with the countries or such groups. Rather, it only wants to bargain in its own favor. So here it says that for this purpose, or for making India Atmanirbhar in the real sense, we require to do a phase wise reduction. That means slowly and slowly we need to reduce the import tariff. Now by import tariff we mean, like for example, India is importing any particular kind of phone, let's say from a particular country. So the original price of that phone in that originating country or the manufacturing country is different. And when that particular thing comes and enters into the territory of India, there are some tariffs or some duties, some taxes that are imposed on the import of that particular good, which ultimately makes those goods very expensive. And thus we need to reduce the import tariff. See, you might be thinking that if at all we reduce the import tariff, would not it be a competition for the domestic manufacturers? See, in general situation, yes, it would be. But when simultaneously we are also developing the domestic manufacturing environment, then definitely it would give a healthy competition to our manufacturers, and thus would add towards the global supply chain as well. So we and in this regard, European Union is a very important and strategic partner for India. So it says that India has an untapped export potential. Now by untapped export potential we mean that India can gain approximately 39.9, like for example, it would be almost $40 billion from European Union if at all we are able to export in the real sense, or in the in our highest potential. But this is still untapped, which means we have not been able to realize, or we have not been able to encash this particular potential in the real world. And also from the Western Europe for products such as apparel, which means the garments, clothes, etc., gems and jewelry, chemicals, etc. So it says that India has a lot of potential in these particular goods for the export, and thus we should definitely pay attention towards the export of these products. Then India currently benefits from European Union's generalized system of preferences. Now, by GSP, or the generalized system of preferences, we simply mean that many a times some countries are given GSP. So keeping in mind the economic status of that country, or maybe the relations of that country. So what we do is that some particular exports which come from the country, so for these country, like for example European Union, these will be the imports that are coming from India. So they will actually be given more preference in terms that maybe less import tariff would be put on them, the charges, the custom duty, etc., they will be reduced, and thus the country that is exporting to these areas, or these nations, like in this example India, it will be benefited due to the GSP system. Then India exported nearly $19.4 billion of worth goods to European Union in 2019, and 37% of India's mercantile exports go to the European Union, which is huge, but can also be increased significantly. But then it says that some Indian products are on the brink of graduation. Now, on being brink of graduation, we mean that there is a kind of saturation coming for them in the country that was earlier consuming or absorbing our particular goods. So, like under the European Union GSP, such are apparel, rubber, electronics, sports, goods, and toys. So these are the things which earlier India was really benefiting from, but now maybe we are not able to improve in the quality, or maybe we are not able to offer the competitive price at the global level. So these goods are kind of facing a saturation, and thus we need to focus on them very staunchly. Then the need for trade and investment ties. So through free trade agreements, what do we do is, with aspects such as investment and non-tariff measures, negotiate investment related aspects with the European Union, especially in tech centers. So basically it says that we should come up at some free trade agreements, or such agreements which are negotiable and which enhance, or which prioritize the the interests of both the importer as well as the exporter. So you can go through these infographics and these stats as well. So India now has a trade deficit with European Union, which we need to work upon. So the next article talks about knowledge and diplomacy. So it says this, that India's ISRO launched Brazil's Amazonia 1 satellite few weeks after India allowed export of COVID-19 vaccine to Brazil as part of the vaccine method diplomacy. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that what is vaccine method diplomacy? See, as we know that India also has been successful in making its own vaccine, which currently is being given to the people in India, which is co-vaccine. So India has promised and also has been already giving and sending a lot of vaccine to vaccine consignments to various countries, and also India sent one such consignment to Brazil as well. And right after that, Brazil had sent and it actually agreed, and it ISRO basically it launched the Amazonia 1 satellite for Brazil. So this actually shows that through knowledge, now see, vaccine is a use of, it is a product of your intellectual property only, right? So because you were able to work on the knowledge aspect, now be it in the science, technology, art, culture, any of it. So basically this knowledge diplomacy helps us as a nation to put a mark on the world. So this very rightly has been given this example that right after India had given its vaccine to Brazil agreed that India could, Brazil actually made its Amazonia 1 satellite to be launched by ISRO, which is India's space research organization. So India's knowledge-based diplomacy, so it has basically decreased over the past quarter. Now, why at all we are concerned about it is that in the past quarter, what has happened is that this knowledge-based diplomacy has significantly reduced. But now by this we mean that maybe the kinds of researches that are happening in the country, and also the kinds of relations that we were earlier able to develop with other countries, they have significantly been hampered. So we have actually lost the leadership in knowledge economy, except sectors such as space, pharma. Please consider it must be pharma and IT, and then because of three reasons. So though we are faring well in the current situation in space, pharmaceutical, that is medicines and all, and the IT sector, but in other sectors we have been falling significantly. Now there could be some reasons to it. Firstly, brain drain since 1970s. Now, this is a big problem which India is facing since 1970s specifically. So by brain drain, what we mean is that the good brains, the brains that are very productive in nature, who are Indian, they were born in India, they studied in India also, but when it comes to reaping the benefits or giving the benefits of their education back to the nation, we have many a times witnessed that they prefer to move to some other countries and work there in exchange of a better pay and other kinds of facilities as well. So that is why now this brain drain has caused a kind of vacuum to take place in the intellect or in the skill of our country, and it has only enhanced the skill and working of the other nations. Secondly, increased competition from China. Now, as we know that China has changed its scenarios in the previous years because it has become a huge hub for manufacturing. And when it comes to the gadgets, specifically for science and technology, China has taken up like almost all the countries in the world, and China has become the manufacturer and producer of such products. And finally, attractive higher education. So obviously in the other countries the higher education is very much has become quite much attractive, unlike what is there in India. So earlier India was also a center for higher education, but recently it has depleted in that direction too. So it no longer brings students even from South Asian countries such as Nepal, Bhutan and Sri Lanka to India. So earlier there were various central universities like Jamia, AMU, etc. They were like even the BHU and other universities that were able to bring in the students from South Asia at least, but now even we have not been able to attract them as well. And the reason there could be that the creature comforts provided and the social environment is no longer cosmopolitan. Now, by cosmopolitan culture, we mean where a culture or a society or a place where the thinking is broad, a place where the people are more broad-minded and more accepting of each other's differences and more tolerant. But in the current situation, as we have seen that many a times we as students and citizens as well tend to exploit the people who come from different countries. Like for example, even students from Nepal, China, etc. are harassed by different names and so on and so forth. And what do we even talk about the foreigners? We even tend to exploit and harass the people who are from northeastern states. So we do not even have the courage to just accept them. And firstly, who are we to accept them, right? They are as much Indians as we are. So definitely the culture that has been developed in our minds and our in our universities and educational places as well, it has become very much narrow minded, and thus the students coming from the foreign countries do not really feel comfortable. And of course, the depleting levels of education and quality have also added significantly to this direction. Then India's competitive advantage in space and pharma sector. Why at all are we able to maintain our competitive space over here? Because we have been able to produce low cost global things. So we are a low cost global provider. That means we can provide for good goods and services in this direction or in this segment at that too at a very low cost. And finally, high quality also is there of the Indian scientists, engineers, biotechnologists, pharmacologists, etc. So with this, let's discuss the final article for the day. I know the session must have turned to be quite long by now, but this is the last one. So it talks about the payoff for rape. So recently, the CJI-led bench asked a man accused of raping a minor if he would marry the victim. Now, obviously, this sounds way too bizarre because a person who has been accused of raping a minor, and we are giving that person the choice if he would want to marry her or not. So it is just like, handing over the victim for whole life to that particular assaulter. So why this remark is not appropriate? So rape is not, it is a non-compoundable offense, which means that it cannot be diluted or mitigated by any settlement reached outside the court. So once there has been a trial which has been started, it is non-compoundable in nature. That means that both the parties cannot by themselves outside the court come on a consensus or a decision. Now it will be the court that would decide in finality. Then the Supreme Court in state of Madhya Pradesh versus Madan Lal in 2015 held that courts should remain absolutely away from such subterfuge of marriage. So see, ironically, this itself is a judgment which came from the Supreme Court, that it said that we should never try to do this, and we should remain absolutely away from any kind of this deceiving idea of marriage, bringing marriage between in such a situation. And also in the case of Shimbu versus state of Haryana, the Supreme Court again held that rape is not a matter to be left for the parties to compromise and settle. And thus, it should be really pondered upon that how and on what grounds could this suggestion be given to the accused. With this, let's just discuss what do we have for news in flash today. World Wildlife Day, which is on 3rd March. So it is a celebration of biodiversity. So it is done to celebrate the world flora and fauna and to raise awareness about animals going extinct. So the theme for 2021 is Forest and Livelihoods, Sustaining People and Planet. So with this, we're done for the day. Thank you so much. Stay tuned with LawSikho for such more updates to come. And do subscribe to our LawSikho CLAT Prep channel. Link is there in the description box for such more daily updates to come. Thank you so much.